I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to write something like this, but here I am, typing at almost 2 in the morning because my head feels too full and too loud. I'm 24, and until a few months ago, my life was painfully ordinary. I wasn't some tortured soul. I wasn't chasing older women. I wasn't trying to be interesting. I just went to work, went to the gym, played video games, hung out with friends on the weekends, and that was pretty much it. And then I met her. The crazy thing is, nothing dramatic happened. No movie-style moment. No slow-motion eye contact. It wasn't a bar or a party or anything remotely romantic. It was the lobby of the building where I work. I was heading out for lunch, juggling my keys, water bottle, and those stupid forms our department prints every Monday. She was coming in, balancing a laptop bag on her shoulder, hair pulled up, glasses on, wearing this dark green shirt that somehow made her look both serious and soft at the same time. She wasn't trying to impress anyone. She wasn't even looking at me. I noticed her because she held the door for me. That's it. Just a simple here you go. In this calm, low voice that somehow hit me harder than it should have. I thanked her, walked out, and forgot about it. Or I thought I did. But the next day, I saw her again. Same time, same calm presence, and something just stuck in my chest. I'm not proud of it, but I actually timed my lunch break the next day hoping I'd see her again. I don't know what that says about me. Maybe that I was bored. Maybe that I was lonely. Or maybe something in me knew she would matter. I didn't even know her name for the first 2 weeks. I learned that she worked as a consultant for one of the firms renting an office on the 3rd floor. I'd see her in the elevator sometimes, never with a big group, always with just her laptop, her phone, maybe a coffee. She had this way of standing that made her look completely comfortable with the space around her. Like she wasn't intimidated by anyone. Like she'd lived a whole life before stepping into that elevator, and I had no idea what that life looked like. I'm used to girls my age. Girls who are fun and loud and constantly scrolling on their phones. I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just the world I knew. She wasn't like that. She was quieter, more observant. When she looked at you, she really looked at you, not through you. It was unsettling at first. I didn't even know she was older until we talked the first time. And man, that first conversation still replays in my head. It was a Friday. I was exhausted after a terrible morning meeting and decided to eat lunch on the bench outside instead of going out. She stepped out of the building with her coffee, saw me sitting there looking half dead, and actually stopped. "You okay?" she asked with that same calm voice. I laughed and said something stupid like, just reconsidering all my life choices. She smiled the way someone older smiles at someone younger, not in a condescending way, more like she'd felt the same thing before, but survived it. Then she sat down on the other side of the bench, not too close, but close enough that I suddenly forgot how to breathe normally. We talked for maybe 15 minutes. It wasn't flirty. It wasn't heavy. It was just easy. She asked what I did, where I was from, how long I'd been with the company. I asked about her job, and she spoke about it the way someone experienced does, not bragging, just sure of herself. I don't think that confidence comes with age specifically, but it does come with experience, and she had plenty. At one point, I asked if she worked on the 3rd floor, and she laughed. "I do. And I'll warn you now, everyone up there is a little insane." She had this dry sense of humor that took a second to land, and when it did, it hit perfectly. When she finally stood up to leave, she said, "It was nice talking to you." And I realized I hadn't given her my name. "It's Evan," I said. She smiled again, smaller this time, softer. "I'm Claire." Claire. Even her name sounded like something from a different chapter of life. That weekend, she stayed on my mind way more than she should have. Not in a crush way. Not in a she's older way. It was something different, like I'd met someone who saw through the noise of everything and somehow made me want to step up and be sharper, calmer, better. I didn't understand it then, but now I know. That 15-minute conversation was the moment everything shifted. The moment my life started bending toward hers, even if I didn't see it yet. Because the next week, things escalated in ways I could have never predicted. The next week didn't feel normal. Not because anything dramatic happened at first, but because I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. How often she passed through the lobby. How her footsteps sounded a little faster on days she seemed rushed. How she always carried her laptop bag on her right shoulder, but switched to her left whenever she was tired. I noticed these things without meaning to, like my brain had tuned itself to her without asking for permission. We didn't talk again until Wednesday. I remember because I'd been frustrated the entire day. My team lead changed deadlines without telling anyone. 2 coworkers called out sick, and lunch tasted like cardboard. I ended up staying late, trying to finish a project that wasn't even mine. When I finally dragged myself to the elevator at almost 6:40 p.m., I honestly just wanted to get home. The elevator doors opened, and there she was, standing inside, leaning slightly against the wall, scrolling through something on her phone. Her hair was down instead of tied up like usual, and there was this relaxed look on her face like she was finally done fighting whatever battles her day threw at her. She looked up the moment I stepped inside. "Oh," she said with a small smile. "Working late today?" I nodded, tired enough that I probably looked like a zombie. "Yeah, my day's been a disaster." "Same," she replied instantly. Not dramatically, almost casually, like she was acknowledging the universe had been equally annoying to both of us. I pressed the button for the lobby, and the doors closed. And then something happened, something tiny, but enough to shift things. She said, "I'm heading out for a quick bite. You eaten yet?" It wasn't flirty. It wasn't planned. She said it the way someone says, "You look like you need a break." And the truth was, I did. But something in me panicked a little. She was older, more experienced, more everything. And I suddenly felt stupidly young, like a kid being invited to sit with the cool adults. "I haven't eaten," I said, trying to sound casual. "But I don't want to interrupt your plans." "You won't," she said with a slight shrug. "You look like you need food. And maybe a reason not to quit your job." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time all day. The elevator doors opened, and she walked out first, turning toward the parking lot. "You coming?" she asked over her shoulder. And just like that, I was. We ended up at this small taco place 5 minutes from the building. Nothing fancy. Order at the counter kind of spot. She paid for her food, I paid for mine, and we sat in a booth near the window. Outside, the sun was half set, painting everything gold. Inside, she rested her chin on her hand, listening as I complained about my day. Not in a dramatic way. She didn't act like she was doing me a favor. She wasn't trying to fix anything. She just listened. When I finally shut up, she asked, "How long have you worked there?" "Almost 2 years," I said. "You?" 10. She took a sip of her drink. "Different companies, same headaches." 10 years. I asked before I could stop myself. She raised an eyebrow. "Is that your polite way of asking how old I am?" I almost choked on my soda. "No. I mean, not exactly. I just..." She laughed. "Relax. I'm 34. I don't know what I expected. Maybe 28. Maybe 30. But 34 felt like a real number. Like adulthood in a way I hadn't touched yet." I nodded, trying not to look surprised. "You thought I was younger, didn't you?" she teased. "Maybe a little." "Well," she said with a soft grin, "pretend you didn't hear the number then." That moment shifted something between us. Not a spark exactly, but an understanding. Like she wasn't hiding who she was, and she wasn't expecting me to pretend I was someone I wasn't. We talked about everything after that. Families, hobbies, places we wanted to travel. Her stories felt richer, lived in, full of people and mistakes and memories that made her real in a way I couldn't explain. When we finished eating, she walked out first but stopped near her car. "Hey," she said, turning toward me. "I enjoyed this." "Me too." She gave me a small, warm smile. "Good. Don't disappear for another week." Before I could answer, she got into her car and drove off. I stood there like an idiot, watching her taillights fade into the evening, wondering why my chest felt too tight. It wasn't a date. It wasn't anything. But something had started that night, quietly, in the space between two people who weren't looking for anything and somehow found a piece of comfort they didn't expect. And over the next few days, that small something grew faster than I was prepared for. The days after that dinner felt different in a way I couldn't admit out loud. Not dramatic, not obsessive, just shifted. Like someone had taken my daily routine and nudged it a few inches to the left. I'd walk through the lobby a little slower, half wondering if she'd be there. I'd catch myself glancing at the third-floor button when I stepped into the elevator, even though I had no reason to go up there. It was stupid, but I couldn't help it. And then she started appearing more often. Sometimes I'd step outside during lunch and find her sitting on that same bench, answering emails or drinking coffee. Sometimes she'd wave me over. Sometimes I'd hesitate for a second, and she'd look up at me with that calm, knowing expression, like she could already tell I needed a break. But what surprised me the most was how natural it felt. There was no awkwardness. No forced energy. We talked like two people who somehow skipped the uncomfortable early stage of getting to know each other. She never treated me like a kid, and I never felt like I had to pretend to be older. One day, she sat next to me and said, "You're quieter this week. What's on your mind?" She didn't ask it like a flirtation. She asked it like someone who'd learned to read people. Or maybe she just learned to read me. "I'm just tired," I said. "Been thinking a lot." "About work?" "No, not exactly." She didn't push. She didn't fish for hints. She just nodded and said, "Thinking can be exhausting if you do too much of it." Then she added, with that playful dryness of hers, "Try to limit it to an hour a day." It made me laugh harder than it should have. But here's the moment everything really started to change. It was a Thursday evening. I'd already packed up my stuff and was walking toward the exit when I saw her standing outside in the parking lot, talking on her phone. She looked frustrated, not angry, just weighed down. Her body language was different, stiffer. Her free hand kept rubbing her forehead, and her voice sounded tight, even from a distance. I didn't mean to stare, but something about the way she stood there made me worry. After a minute, she hung up and just stayed still. She wasn't crying. She wasn't upset in a dramatic way. She just looked like someone trying to hold herself together. I walked up slowly. "Everything okay?" She startled a little, then forced a small smile. "Sorry, didn't see you." "You look stressed," I said, trying not to sound intrusive. Her shoulders dropped just a little. "It's nothing. Family stuff." She didn't owe me an explanation, and I didn't want to pry, but the crack in her voice made something twist inside my chest. "You want to talk about it?" I asked. She shook her head gently. "Not right now, but thank you." We stood there for a moment, the summer air warm around us, cars passing in the distance. And then she said something I didn't expect. "Walk with me." We ended up strolling along the sidewalk near the building, slow, quiet steps, the kind that happen when you're thinking more than talking. She told me she'd been dealing with pressure from her family about moving back to her hometown, something she didn't want to do but felt obligated to consider. "It's complicated," she said. "I know what I want, but I also know what everyone expects from me." I understood that more than she realized. Being in your 20s feels like a constant tug of war between who you are and who you're supposed to be. But I didn't say that. I just listened. At one point, she stopped walking and looked at me. "You're easy to talk to," she said quietly. It shouldn't have made my heart jump, but it did. "You too." She smiled, but it wasn't like her usual smiles. This one felt unguarded, like she was letting me see something behind the calm surface she usually carried. "I meant it," she added. "I don't let people in easily." I swallowed hard, suddenly aware of how close we were standing. Close enough that I could see the faint freckles on her cheeks. Close enough that I felt the warmth of her breath when she exhaled. But nothing happened. No kiss. No dramatic moment. Instead, she gently bumped her shoulder against mine and said, "Come on, walk me to my car." When we reached it, she turned to me and said, "Thank you for listening." I didn't realize how much I needed that. "Anytime," I said, and I meant it. She tilted her head slightly, studying me for a second, the kind of look someone gives when they're weighing a decision. And then she said, "You know, you surprise me. Is that good or bad?" "Good," she answered softly. "Very good." She got into her car, and I watched her drive off again. But this time, something felt undeniably different. Not romantic, not friendly, something in between, something fragile and warm and slowly growing. And that was the beginning of the shift I couldn't undo. After that evening walk, things between us weren't the same, not in a dramatic way, but in the subtle, invisible kind that sneaks up on you. The next day, when I saw her in the lobby, she didn't just nod or give a polite hello. She smiled like she was genuinely happy to see me. Not the small professional smile she gave other people, the one meant for me. The one that made my stomach tighten in a way I tried to ignore. We didn't spend long together that morning. She was rushing to a meeting, I was running late myself. But when the elevator doors were closing, she said, "Lunch later," like it was the most natural thing in the world. I said yes a little too quickly. At lunch, we sat inside the building cafeteria, a noisy, fluorescent-lit place most people avoided unless they had to be there. Somehow, with her, it didn't feel dull. She had this ability to make even the boring parts of life feel grounded, like they mattered more than they did. "Feeling better today?" I asked. "Much," she said. "Thanks to yesterday." And it wasn't flirtatious. It wasn't suggestive. It was honest. I didn't want to dig into her personal issues again, but curiosity kept poking at the back of my mind. Not because I wanted to pry, but because she'd let me see a side of her most people probably didn't. And once someone lets you in like that, it's hard not to wonder about the rest of their story. She must have noticed my quietness because she nudged my foot under the table. "What's going on in that head of yours?" "Just thinking," I said. "Still within your 1 hour limit." I laughed. "Barely." She grinned. "Good. I don't want to be responsible for your brain overheating." It hit me then. The ease between us wasn't normal. Not for two people who had known each other only a few weeks. Not for people who weren't technically friends, not yet. And definitely not for two people 10 years apart who had no reason to be pulled into each other's orbit. But I didn't want to question it. Not then. Over the next couple weeks, our lunches became regular. Not scheduled, not expected. Just something that happened because we both wanted them to. Sometimes we talked about deep things. Sometimes we joked. Sometimes we barely talked at all, just sat near each other in that comfortable silence only certain people can create. Little things started happening that made the space between us feel even smaller. She'd fix the collar of my jacket without thinking. I'd hold the elevator door for her even if it meant missing my floor. She'd brush her hand against mine when we walked. I'd text her after work. "Did you make it home okay?" She'd reply with a photo of her cat sitting on her laptop, like proof she was safe. None of it was romantic. None of it crossed a line. But it all meant something. And then came the moment I realized I was in trouble. It was a slow Friday afternoon. I was in the break room, leaning against the counter, waiting for the microwave to finish heating my lunch. She walked in a minute later, holding a cup and looking unimpressed with the coffee machine. "This thing hates me," she muttered. "It hates everyone," I said. "You're just taking it personally." She shot me this look, amused, annoyed, and slightly playful all at once. Then filled her cup anyway. The machine sputtered like it was on life support. "See," she pointed. "Disrespect." "You can always use mine," I said. "It's much nicer." "Oh," she said, raising an eyebrow. "Nicer coffee or nicer company?" I froze. She didn't. She just smirked and walked past me, brushing her shoulder lightly against my arm. My pulse jumped instantly. I tried to play it off, but my face probably gave everything away. She stopped in the doorway, turned back to me, and said quietly, "Relax. I'm teasing." But the tone behind it wasn't the same playful one she used before. This one was softer, warmer, a little slower, and it made something inside me shift. The microwave beeped. She waited for me to grab my food, and then said, "Walk with me." I followed her to a small and used meeting room she sometimes used to work in. She shut the door, not fully, but enough to drown out the office noise. She sat down, pulled her knees up slightly, and took a slow drink of her coffee. "You seem nervous," she said. "I'm not," I lied badly. She tilted her head, studying me with that same unguarded expression she'd given me the night she talked about her family. And then, in the calmest, simplest voice, she said, "You don't have to be. Just 4 words. No meaning spelled out. No hidden implication." But the way she looked at me, steady, patient, almost gentle, made my throat tighten. I didn't know if this was becoming something. I didn't know if she wanted it to. I didn't know if I should. But I did know one thing. I was falling. Slowly, quietly, completely. And I wasn't sure she had any idea. After that moment in the small meeting room, those 4 quiet words, the steady look, the way the air between us shifted, I spent the whole weekend replaying everything in my head, overthinking it, reanalyzing every smile, every brush of her hand, every time she leaned just a little closer than necessary. I tried to convince myself it meant nothing, that she was just naturally warm, naturally attentive, naturally good at making people feel seen. But deep down, I knew the truth. She didn't treat everyone like that. She treated me like that, and that scared me more than I wanted to admit. Monday morning, I arrived at work earlier than usual. Maybe I wanted to see her. Maybe I wanted to avoid her. Maybe both. I walked into the lobby, still half asleep, and there she was, leaning against the wall near the elevators, sipping iced coffee and scrolling through her phone. She looked up the second she sensed me approaching. "Morning," she said, smiling softly. Just 1 word, but it knocked the breath out of me. "Morning," I managed. We stepped into the elevator together. No one else got in. The doors closed, and for a few seconds, neither of us said anything. The air felt different again, quiet, charged, like the beginning of a storm. Then she said, "You disappeared this weekend." "I didn't disappear," I said. "I just stayed busy." She raised a skeptical eyebrow. I swallowed. Did you? Did you want me to text?" Her smile shifted. Not teasing. Not playful. Something slower, more deliberate. I wouldn't have minded. Her voice was soft, but the meaning hit me like a punch to the chest. She wasn't playing. She wasn't guessing. She knew exactly what she was saying, and she let it hang in the air like a test I wasn't sure I was prepared for. The elevator dinged. She stepped out, but before leaving entirely, she turned back slightly. "Next time," she said, "text." I stood there like an idiot as the doors closed again. That single interaction replayed in my head all day. Every time my phone buzzed with a work notification, I wondered if she'd text me first, but she didn't. She wasn't chasing. She wasn't pulling me in. She just opened a door and waited to see what I'd do. At lunch, I finally grew a spine and messaged her. "Break soon." She replied almost instantly. "Conference room 3A. 10 minutes." I don't think I've ever walked anywhere so fast without running. When I entered the room, she was sitting on the long table, legs dangling slightly, hands resting on either side of her. She looked relaxed, confident, completely in control. But when she saw me, something in her expression softened. "You made it," she said lightly. "Yeah, I didn't want to keep you waiting." "You didn't," she replied. "I just needed a quiet place." We sat together, but not side by side. She was perched on the table. I was sitting in a chair facing her. It felt more intimate than anything we'd done before, even though nothing was happening. "How was your weekend?" she asked. "Boring," I said honestly. "Thought about work too much." She tilted her head slightly. "Thought about me?" I froze. Completely. She didn't laugh. She didn't smirk. She asked it calmly, like she genuinely wanted the truth. "Yeah," I admitted finally. Her eyes held mine for a moment that felt heavier than it should have. "I thought about you too," she said. My heart dropped straight into my stomach. Not because she said it romantically. She didn't. It wasn't breathy or flirtatious. It was direct, grounded, real, like she was stating a fact she wasn't embarrassed about. "I'm not sure what this is," I said quietly, "or what you want it to be." She breathed out slowly. "I don't know either. And I'm not asking you for anything." "Then what are we doing?" She looked down at her hands for a moment, then back at me. "I think," she said carefully, "we're getting closer. Whether we mean to or not." The room felt warmer. Smaller. Like the walls had moved in a little. "Is that a good thing?" I asked. She gave a faint smile. "It could be." Then, after a pause, she added, "But it could also get complicated." There it was, the truth I'd been avoiding. She was older. She had a career, expectations, people who relied on her. I was at the beginning of my own life. We weren't equals in experience, and we both knew it. "But," she continued softly, "I'm not scared of complicated." My breath caught. She leaned forward slightly, not touching me, but close enough that I felt the warmth of her skin. "I just need to know you're not either." I swallowed hard. "I don't think I am." Her eyes softened with something dangerously close to affection. "Good," she whispered. Silence stretched between us. Not uncomfortable, not awkward. Just heavy. Anticipatory. The kind of silence that feels like the moment before a first kiss, even if neither person moves. She didn't. I didn't. But something unspoken passed between us. Undeniable, fragile, and burning slow. She finally slid off the table, brushed a hand lightly against my shoulder, and said, "Come on, we should get back." But when she walked past me, her fingers lingered for just 1 second longer than they should have. And that 1 second felt like the beginning of something neither of us would be able to step away from. When the fall festival weekend finally arrived, I tried to convince myself it was just another date. Just another Saturday. Just another chance to see the woman who had somehow become the center of every thought I had. But the truth was obvious even to me. I was nervous in a way I hadn't been in years. The drive to the festival grounds took about half an hour, most of it lined with orange and red trees leaning over the road like they were trying to listen in on my anxiety. I spotted her waiting near the wooden entrance arch. Dark jeans, brown boots, a fitted cream turtleneck, and a long camel coat that made her look effortlessly put together. The wind lifted her hair, and she tucked a strand behind her ear just as she saw me. She smiled like she'd been waiting for this moment. "Hey," she said, stepping closer. "Ready?" "Yeah," I answered, trying to sound calm. She slipped her arm through mine. Come on, I want to show you something. The festival was crowded, full of families, couples, kids running with caramel apples, live music echoing from somewhere behind the pumpkin patch. She led me through all of it with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. Where are we? You'll see, she said, pulling me along. We stopped at a booth selling handmade candles and soaps. The woman behind the counter greeted her by name. Hi, Anna, the vendor said brightly. Back for more? Anna leaned slightly toward me. I get my favorite winter candle here. The vendor lifted a jar. Try this. I opened it. Cinnamon, clove, orange peel, and something warm I couldn't place. That's really good, I said. Anna reached for my hand and placed the jar in it. Then we'll take two. I asked, surprised. She shrugged. I want you to have one. So when you light it, you'll think of this. Her voice dipped on the last word. Heat spread through my chest. I nodded, unable to form anything more intelligent. We wandered from booth to booth, talking, laughing, sampling food. Every once in a while, she'd touch my arm or shoulder, and each time, it felt deliberate. Not bold, not aggressive, just intimate. When we reached the hayride line, I thought we'd pass it. Instead, she tightened her coat and said, Let's do it. The line moved slowly. Kids tossed hay at each other while parents pretended not to be annoyed. When we finally climbed into the wagon, she sat beside me, close enough that our legs touched. The tractor rumbled to life, and the wagon jerked forward. The farm stretched into open fields and distant trees. The sky shifted to a soft peach. She leaned into me slightly. I've been looking forward to today, she said quietly. So have I. She looked up at me, and something in her eyes softened. For a few seconds, we didn't speak. There was no need. The air between us felt charged, not with the wild heat from the night we met, but with something steadier, deeper. Halfway through the ride, the wagon hit a dip. She lost her balance and grabbed my arm, her fingers curling into my sleeve. Sorry, she murmured. It's okay, I said. You can hold on. I expected her to let go after a moment. She didn't. When the ride ended and people started climbing down, she stayed close as we walked toward the bonfire area. A musician was warming up on a small wooden stage. The scent of burning wood drifted through the air. Anna found us a spot on a bench, and for a while, we watched the flames and listened to the soft guitar notes. A couple near us kissed gently, quietly, without show. Anna glanced at them, then at me. You know, she said, her voice almost a whisper. I can tell you're holding back. From what? From me. I swallowed. I'm just trying not to rush things. Her eyes moved slowly across my face, studying me. You're not rushing anything. If anything, you're making me wonder if you even want this as much as I do. I do, I said immediately, the words leaving my mouth before I could think. She smiled slightly. Then stop overthinking. She shifted closer, her knee brushing mine. Her voice lowered, warm and unguarded. I want you. Not just for tonight. Not just for the thrill. I want everything this could be. My chest tightened. You're not scared? I asked. Of all of this? The age thing? What people might think? She shook her head. I'm not scared of wanting you. Are you scared of wanting me? I hesitated for a fraction of a second, just enough for her to notice. Her hand found mine. Don't lie, she whispered. I exhaled. Yeah, I am. She squeezed my fingers, firm but gentle. Good. That means this isn't casual for you. The fire crackled. The crowd dimmed into background noise. Then she leaned in and kissed me. Slow, intentional, full of certainty. Not heated, not wild. Something deeper. Something that asked a question and answered it in the same breath. When she pulled back, her forehead rested against mine. This is only the beginning, she whispered. I didn't even have to think about it. The moment she said stay tonight, something inside me just settled, like I'd already made that choice long before she voiced it. I nodded, and she let out a quiet breath. Relief, maybe, or simply confirmation that she hadn't misread me. She guided me back to the living room, dimming the lights until only the soft glow from a floor lamp filled the space. The atmosphere shifted, gentle, intimate, not heavy the way passion sometimes is, but calm in a way I hadn't felt in years. Make yourself comfortable, she said, slipping off her coat and hanging it neatly. I'm going to change into something warmer. She disappeared down the hall, and I sank into the couch. Everything in her apartment felt curated but lived in. books stacked sideways, a half-finished mug of tea on the kitchen counter, a blanket draped over the armchair like she'd fallen asleep there before. It felt like a place a real person lived, someone disciplined, but not cold, someone passionate, but not chaotic. After a few minutes, she returned wearing soft dark leggings and an oversized navy sweater, her hair pulled into a loose braid over one shoulder. For the first time since meeting her, she looked, not older, not younger, just human. Approachable. Warm. She sat beside me, tucking her legs underneath herself. "You look like you're thinking too much," she said. "Maybe. Want to talk about it?" I exhaled slowly. "I'm trying to make sense of how fast this is going." She tilted her head. "And do you think fast means wrong?" "No," I answered. "Just unfamiliar." She smiled faintly. "Good. I can live with unfamiliar." For a moment we sat in silence, the kind that didn't feel awkward. Then she reached for the remote and turned on soft lo-fi music, the kind that barely filled the room but made the quiet less intimidating. "Come here," she said gently. I shifted closer, and she pulled a blanket over both of us, her thigh pressing lightly against mine. The warmth of her body seeped through the fabric of her sweater. "You know," she murmured, "most men my age don't listen. They're loud with their intentions. You're quieter." "Is that good?" "It's what I needed," she said. Her hand slid across the couch and rested on my knee. Not possessive, not teasing. Just a touch to remind me she was there. "Tell me something honest," she said softly. I hesitated. "Like what?" "Something you usually keep to yourself." I thought for a moment. Then the words came out before I could stop them. "I feel like I've spent the last few years pretending I'm more sure of myself than I actually am." Anna's expression softened, not with pity, but understanding. "You don't have to pretend with me." "That's the thing," I said. "I don't want to." She shifted closer, her shoulder brushing mine. "Good. Because I want the real you. Not the you who thinks he has to impress me." Her fingers slid gently between mine. I squeezed her hand, and she let her head rest lightly on my shoulder. "This feels natural," she whispered. "Too natural." "I know." Her laugh was low, warm. "Does that scare you?" "A little." "Me too," she said. But she didn't pull away. After a while, she straightened and stood. "Come on," she said. "There's something I want to show you." She led me into her bedroom, not with sexual intention, but with a quiet kind of trust. The room was softly lit, a large window overlooking the street, a duvet in muted colors, two bedside lamps glowing warmly. She opened a drawer and took out a small wooden box. "This belonged to my grandmother," she said. "She always said you share pieces of your life slowly, with purpose." She opened the box. Inside were small objects, a worn bracelet, a folded photo, a concert ticket that looked decades old, a tiny seashell. "These are the things I keep closest," she said. "The things that shaped me." She looked at me with a seriousness that tightened my chest. "I don't show this to people. Not because I'm guarding it, but because most people don't stay long enough for it to matter." "And you think I will?" I asked quietly. She stepped closer, her fingers brushing my jaw. "I don't know," she said, "but I want to find out." She closed the box, set it gently on her nightstand, then turned back to me. "I'm not asking for promises," she whispered. "Just tonight. Just honesty. I can give you that." She smiled, soft, real, vulnerable in a way she hadn't been before. "Then stay with me," she said, lifting the blanket on her bed. She didn't mean it sexually. She meant it sincerely. She meant be here. I climbed into bed beside her. She curled against me, her head on my chest, her hand resting above my heart. The intimacy was deeper than anything physical we'd shared. As her breathing steadied and the room grew quiet, I realized something that terrified and thrilled me at the same time. I wasn't just falling for her. I already had. The drive back from the festival should have felt lighter, easier, after everything that happened by the fire. But instead, the air in the car was thick with the kind of electricity that makes your thoughts louder than they should be. Her hand rested on my thigh, not suggestively, just like she belonged there. Like this closeness was already natural. Halfway back to town, she spoke softly. "Do you want to come over?" "Not for anything crazy. Just stay with me a little longer." I should have hesitated. I didn't. "Yeah," I said. "I do." Her place was on a quiet street lined with old maples. She lived on the second floor of a renovated duplex. Warm lighting, modern furniture, shelves full of books that looked well-read, not decorative. The space felt like her, Intentional, calm, controlled, but lived in. Sit, she said, motioning toward the couch. I'm making tea. I watched her move around the kitchen, the soft glow of the under-cabinet lights tracing the curves beneath her sweater. The domesticity of it, it hit me harder than I expected. This wasn't the dim bar where we met or the heated softness of her bedroom from that first night. This was her home, her real life, and she was letting me into it like it was the most natural thing in the world. She returned with 2 mugs and curled up beside me. Our knees brushed, and instead of pulling away, she rested her legs against mine. You okay? She asked, reading me like she always seemed to. Yeah, just thinking. About you. This. Everything. She took a slow sip and placed her mug on the table. Tell me what's going on in your head. I ran a hand through my hair. I'm not used to feeling this much this fast. She smiled faintly. You say that like you think it's a problem. I don't know if it is. I just don't want to mess anything up. Anna shifted, turning her body toward mine. One leg draped gently over my knee, bringing her close enough that her breath warmed my skin. You couldn't mess this up unless you tried, she said quietly. And I don't think you're the type to run. I'm not, I said, but I don't want to overwhelm you either. She laughed softly, brushing her thumb along the inside of my wrist. You're worried about overwhelming me? You're older, more experienced. She cut me off with a shake of her head. Don't do that. Do what? Put me on some pedestal. I'm older, sure, but that doesn't mean I have everything figured out. I want something real, and I'm not ashamed to admit it. But that doesn't make me invincible. Her honesty hit me like a shift in gravity. She leaned forward, her voice lowering. And I like that you make me feel things I didn't think I'd feel again. The room went quiet, heavy, warm, charged. She moved closer, climbing into my lap with slow, unhurried confidence, like she wanted me to feel every second of the decision. Her hands cupped my jaw. I want to kiss you again, she whispered, but I need you to tell me if that's okay. Instead of answering with words, I slid my hands to her waist, pulling her gently toward me. That was enough. Her mouth met mine, soft at first, then deeper, but still controlled, still patient, like she was memorizing the shape of every breath I took. When she finally pulled back, she rested her forehead against mine. You're different, she murmured. You don't push. You don't try to impress me. You just let me in. I want to, I said. She smiled, touched my cheek, then slid off my lap with a slow, careful movement. Come with me, she said, standing. For a moment, I thought she was leading me to the bedroom again. And maybe she saw that expectation in my eyes, because she paused at the hallway and smirked. Relax, she said. Not tonight. Not like that. She opened the door to a small studio room. Paint canvases stacked against the walls, a long table full of brushes, jars, unfinished pieces. Soft spotlights glowed above them. This is where I spend my Sundays, she said. My quiet place. The paintings were nothing like the woman I thought I understood. They were bold, chaotic, full of movement. Sharp colors, raw emotion, unfiltered energy. You paint like you feel too much, I said without thinking. Her eyes softened. Maybe I do. She stepped beside me, close enough that our arms touched. I want you to see the parts of me I don't show most people. Why me? Because you don't look away, she said. You don't flinch. You just see me. She reached for my hand, not passionately, not possessively, just simply. I like how quiet your presence is, she whispered. We stood there, surrounded by her artwork, the air still between us, but full of something growing, something neither of us could name yet. Then she lifted my hand, pressed a soft kiss to my knuckles, and whispered, Stay tonight. Just stay. I woke up that Saturday morning with her voice still echoing in my mind, teasing me, making my chest tighten in the best possible way. Our nights together had become routine in their unpredictability, a perfect contradiction that kept me constantly on edge. I hadn't imagined that a woman like her, confident, experienced, and unapologetically herself, could also be soft and attentive in ways that made me feel like I was the most important person in the world. That day, she suggested we take a drive up the coast. It was spontaneous, just like most things with her, and I didn't hesitate to agree. Her car smelled faintly of vanilla and something musky I couldn't name, a scent that was now permanently etched into my memory. As we drove, the conversation meandered from trivial office stories to deep, reflective thoughts about life and I found myself opening up to her more than I ever had with anyone my age. "You're different," she said suddenly, glancing at me with those piercing eyes that seemed to read straight into me. "Most guys your age wouldn't even know where to start in a conversation like this." Her tone was teasing, yet serious, and I felt a blush creep onto my cheeks. "Maybe I'm just lucky," I replied, trying to sound casual, though my heart was racing. She laughed, a low, rich sound that made me forget how to speak properly. "Lucky, huh? Don't get used to it, kid." There was that playful edge she always had, a reminder that no matter how close we were, she was in charge, confident in her world in a way that was intoxicating. The coast was beautiful that day. Waves crashed against the cliffs, and gulls swooped and cried in the salty breeze. She parked at a lookout, and we stepped out. The wind whipped her hair across her face, and I caught myself staring, completely mesmerized. She noticed, smirking slightly, and I quickly looked away, embarrassed but thrilled that she'd caught me. We spent the afternoon walking along the cliffs, talking about everything and nothing. At one point, she grabbed my hand, lacing our fingers together, and I felt a spark that wasn't just physical. It was something deeper, something that made me realize how much she had already wormed her way into my life. She leaned on my shoulder, quiet for a moment, just enjoying the breeze and the view. "You know," she said softly, "I didn't think someone your age could actually keep up with me mentally, emotionally, and," she hesitated, searching my face. "Intimately." Her smile was teasing, but I felt the weight of her words. I swallowed hard, trying to appear casual. "I guess we're both full of surprises." By the time we got back into the car, the sky had turned pink with the setting sun. The drive back was quiet, filled with the comfortable hum of music and her occasional laughter at something on the radio. When we reached her apartment, I didn't want the day to end, and I think she sensed it. "Want to stay for a while?" she asked, voice low and seductive. The invitation was clear, and my heart did that familiar flip-flop. I nodded, and she led me inside. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and something floral, and as soon as we were in the living room, she pulled me close. There was a hunger in her kiss that made me forget everything else: weekdays, responsibilities, even my own caution. Her hands roamed over me, and mine over her, each touch a mix of familiarity and discovery. We moved to the couch, where the sunlight fading through the blinds painted stripes across our skin. Our conversation had become unnecessary. The tension, the connection, the sheer magnetism between us spoke louder than words. She paused only to whisper my name, a sound that made me shiver. Afterward, we lay tangled together, our breathing slowly sinking, and she traced patterns on my chest with her fingers. "You're learning fast," she murmured, teasing and proud at the same time. I smiled, feeling a surge of pride and desire. We talked late into the night, our conversation drifting from memories to dreams to future plans neither of us would fully admit we were imagining. The intimacy wasn't just physical, it was mental, emotional, and somehow spiritual. I realized that I was falling, not just for her body, not just for the thrill of forbidden or taboo excitement, but for the entirety of her, her mind, her confidence, her flaws, her tenderness. Finally, sleep claimed us, her head on my chest, my arm around her shoulders. I felt a peace I hadn't known I could feel at 24, lying next to someone who challenged me, delighted me, and terrified me all at once. And as I drifted off, I knew that this story, our story, was only just beginning. The days ahead promised more intensity, more passion, more challenges, but somehow, with her, I was ready. Ready to learn, ready to stumble, ready to grow into something I hadn't even known I could be. The week after our coastal day together started like any other, but with a subtle shift that I couldn't ignore. There was an unspoken tension between us now, a mixture of familiarity and anticipation that hung in the air like electricity. Even the small moments, her brushing past me in the kitchen, the way she would laugh at a joke only I understood, felt charged. She called me that Tuesday evening, her voice casual, but with that underlying tone that always made my stomach twist. "Want to come over?" she asked. No explanation, no reasoning, just the invitation. My heart jumped. I had learned by now that when she asked, it wasn't a simple hangout. It was a promise of something more. By the time I got to her apartment, the city lights flickering outside were mirrored by the spark I felt in her eyes. She was leaning against the counter, arms crossed, wearing that confident smirk I had come to both dread and crave. "You're late," she teased. I shrugged, trying to seem indifferent, but she shook her head with amusement. "You're hopeless," she said, though the way she said it made me feel like I had passed some secret test. We sat on the couch, close but not touching at first. The conversation flowed easily, but the tension beneath it was palpable. Every glance, every brush of our hands on the couch cushion was deliberate, a dance of control and surrender. Finally, she reached over and took my hand, letting her fingers weave between mine. That simple touch made the rest of the world vanish. Hours passed in a blur of laughter, whispered confessions, and the slow building of desire. She had this way of looking at me, serious, playful, intense, all at once. I had never felt seen in the way she saw me. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," she murmured, her forehead resting against mine. I never thought I'd feel this way again. Her honesty hit me like a shockwave. For a brief moment, the playfulness faded, replaced by something raw and real. Neither did I admitted. The vulnerability between us was electrifying, binding us in a way that was impossible to ignore. Later, she led me to her bedroom, where the evening took on the intimacy that had become our hallmark. It wasn't rushed. Every touch, every kiss was deliberate, like a silent conversation that only we understood. Our passion was fiery but measured, a crescendo that built over time, leaving us both breathless and exhilarated. Afterward, lying tangled in the sheets, she traced lazy circles on my arm, her face soft and contemplative. "You're different," she said. "You make me feel alive in ways I forgot I could." I felt the weight of her words, the depth of connection that had grown between us, and I realized I felt the same. She wasn't just a thrill, she wasn't just experience. She was the kind of presence that left an imprint on your soul. The following days were filled with small, intimate adventures. Late-night diners, stolen kisses in quiet streets, debates about music and movies, and the comfortable silences where nothing needed to be said. Each moment deepened our bond, layering trust, excitement, and desire in ways I hadn't thought possible for someone my age. But it wasn't perfect. There were moments of doubt, of jealousy, of insecurity creeping in, mine mostly, but she handled them with patience and a firm sense of reality. She never belittled my feelings, never rushed me, and yet never hid her own complexity. It was a delicate balance, and I was constantly learning how to navigate it. One night, as we sat on her balcony, city lights twinkling below us, she turned to me with that half-smile that meant she was serious. "I like you," she said simply. No qualifiers, no hesitation. My chest tightened, and I realized I was holding my breath. "I like you too," I replied, my voice quiet but firm. In that moment, I felt a profound clarity. This wasn't just about lust or thrill or the taboo excitement of an age-gap romance. It was about connection, about growth, about learning to trust and be vulnerable with someone who both challenged and nurtured me. The story wasn't over. We both knew there would be ups and downs, misunderstandings, and challenges. But for the first time, I felt like I had found someone who made life feel fuller, brighter, and infinitely more thrilling. Every touch, every word, every laugh shared with her was a reminder of that truth. As I left her apartment that night, her hand lingering in mine, I looked back and saw her watching me with that gaze that made everything else fade. And in that look, I understood. This was only the beginning. We had found something rare, something electric, something that neither of us could have anticipated. And I knew, without a doubt, that I was ready to follow this story wherever it would lead.